Hey guys, we're going to be going over Photoshop today, and this is just going to be a quick primer to get you guys into the program and make sure you're all up to date on this. You should have already had a class on Photoshop, but I kind of just want to make sure we're all up to speed on it. So we're going to be going over some basics, and then the next lecture is going to be your milestone for this week. So we'll go ahead and get into Photoshop here, clicking New File. We have a couple settings that we can go over here. You have default templates that you can select automatically from the top row here. I typically just go and manage this directly in this panel right here though. So here you can change the width, height, and resolution of your drawing. Um, Depending on what you're doing, if you're doing something for print, you're going to want to set it to inches so that you know the size that it's going to come out when this gets printed. Whereas if you're doing something for web or just entirely digital, you'll want to manage the pixels themselves, and this resolution isn't terribly important. You can also change the color mode. So if you're going to be doing something for print, again, you want to make sure that you're in CMYK mode. And this is going to give you better color resolution when you go to print versus working in RGB. So anytime you're setting up anytime you're setting something up for a presentation or a poster, you want to make sure that you're using the CMYK mode here versus RGB. And that's just because of how color works here. Using a dedicated black channel and cyan, magenta, and yellow for the different color streams is going to give you, again, a better visual when you go to print. So that's why you want to make sure you choose that, again, if you're going for print. We're going to be fine with just doing some of these defaults here. So I'm going to go with the 7x5, 300 pixels per inch, RGB white background, and we'll just get into this and cover some things, all right? So I'm going to hit create. And it's got basically that same 7x5 rather layout that we selected in that previous screen. I'm going to go ahead and hit B, and it looks like I've got a couple settings on already, so I might have to change some stuff. So let me. I was messing around before the lecture. Okay, so right now I've got a pen. You guys probably have this default 30 going on. So just hit B or click on this brush right here and that'll get you drawing. You should be on the background already, so don't worry about anything else. Just hit B and we'll draw a couple lines on here. You can see that, oh, I've got also that. So let me hit D, and D is actually going to give me the default setting here, right? So it's going to set it to be white and white in the foreground, light in the dark, or white in the background. So that'll immediately get me drawing with that. I can choose which one is selected right now, or basically flip these back and forth with X, which is the same as clicking this little switchy arrow right here. So let's talk about pixels real quick. I'm going to go ahead and zoom in here. I'm going to hold down Alt, and if I scroll the mouse wheel, in my case it's forward. I don't know how it is on your computer, but you can see that I can zoom in relative to the position of the mouse. You can also do that you can also move around by kind of choosing areas to zoom in and out from. It's a handy way of getting around. You can also hold down spacebar if you need to move around. So if I zoomed in here, I could just hold down spacebar, click and drag, and that would get me over to here. So as far as RGB colors, you can see that if I hover over this, we're at a mid-range, so it's 135 out of 255, whereas if I hover over this black, it's 0, and if I hover over a white, it's 255 in these values right here. So that just helps us understand how bright of a color we're using. Every single one of these pixels, if I zoom in, you can see all these individual squares right here. And this file is storing just a whole mess of these. Each one is going to have its own data. And if we wanted to, we could even double click on this background here. That'll convert this into a layer that we can edit. And if I was to erase, you can see that we have this checkerboard pattern here. And that actually gives us transparency as well. So we can actually work with a transparent background while we're in Photoshop. Just remember that you have to double click on this. We can also add new layers here so we can work on top of different things. So if I was to, let me switch back to this, draw on top of here, I didn't change anything about this initial layer. So often when you're working on something a little bit more complex or you want to do non-destructive work, you want to copy the layer that you're working on. So if I do layer, duplicate layer, and then I can just hide this initial one that I was messing with a minute ago, make some changes, and then compare the two. And if I like the changes, I can keep them. If not, I can just get rid of that layer. Anytime you're working like this, it's best to do non-destructive work where you're at least saving a copy of the layer that, or the original image that you were working with, so that if you do make a kind of big mistake and can't get back to it, at least you have that original and you don't lose any data. So let's go ahead and jump into the brushes real quick here. So I still have the brush tool selected. Let me go ahead and change this over. Again, we have different ways of selecting our colors that we're going to be using. You can choose based on hue with this bar, saturation with this bar. You can do the, I forget what that one stands for. But you can basically have it, choose the color channel here. What is it? Hue, saturation. I forget what it is. It's not super important. But basically this lets you change how you want to select your colors. So if I want to just go, okay, well, I know it has to be in this part of the, the red spectrum. Now I can change the blue and green settings by dragging around in here. But it's pretty easy to just stay in the hue selection right here and then kind of jump around. Oh, this is black. That's what it is. How close to black it is. Yeah, all right. So I'm going to go ahead and choose, we'll do that color right there. And then I'll hit X, and I can double click on this. And we'll do a fun green color too, just so that I've got this going. So let me go over here. We'll choose a brush settings. Right now, again, I'm on this default 30 pixel one. You can change the size of the brush. So right now I have 30 pixels here. If you hit the bracket keys on the keyboard, and those are those little ones that kind of look like that and that, you can change, and if I hold it, I can go really quick. I can change the size of this brush tool that I'm using right here. You can click and drag like I just did right there. Another thing that's helpful in this is if you were to click, hold down Shift, and then click again, that'll draw a straight line. So I can actually go around drawing a whole bunch of straight lines here. That'll come in handy for the milestone that we'll be doing tonight. Back into this menu here, so we have a couple different options here. We went over size. The hardness is how sharp the edges are on this. So if I take this hardness all the way down, let's give it a little bit more size here. You can see how that's fuzzy on the edge, right, compared to some of these others. So you can change how kind of aggressive the edge of what you're working with is. You can also change the spacing. This isn't super fun or super effective for the milestone that we're going to be doing, but it is kind of a neat thing. I've done a couple cool effects with that where I did like a postage stamp sort of deal where I used the spacing with an eraser to create a like a postage stamp effect to erase part of things. So if I went through here, did that, get rid of that. Oh, this will turn into a nightmare. Let me just do it real quick. So if I did this, do a fill in here, and then eraser tool spacing. I gotta do it now that I did it right. So that's how you can do kind of like a postage stamp effect without having to get into a whole bunch of crazy settings. So it's kind of handy for a couple different things there. If we go into the shape dynamics here, we can change some different things. So we can change the size jitter. So you can see right there, it kind of goes in different random sizes. Oops, what am I doing? That was the erase tool still. Okay, size jitter. So you can see it's going to draw to different sizes. There's the diameter. So you set a minimum. And this would kind of control the maximum so that if you want it to kind of do different things, you can change that. There's the angle jitter. So if I was to go back here and choose something like this, we could change it. See how they're all kind of spinning around randomly? So if you go through here like that, you can kind of create a pattern like that. But if you were to increase the spacing here, you could kind of come in here and try and generate a pattern. For maybe a flooring, if you want to reuse this as a particular type of spotted material that you can't get a pattern for elsewhere. That'll come in handy later in the semester when we're actually doing SketchUp and you're putting patterns into your projects. So you could use this tool to sample a pattern that you may not be able to achieve or find online somewhere else. So let me go back to shape dynamics here. We have angle jitter, which we just did, roundness jitter. So that's going to kind of randomly squeeze these in different directions. Haven't found that one super useful. Scattering's fun. This is where you get into kind of some of the fun stuff with it. And let me go back here. And this is what I had on earlier. So, and let me hit X too, and we'll switch to a different color. So you can see that I'm using a big scatter right here, and a lot of count, and we're ending up with a whole bunch of things. High count jitter. So if we kind of mess some of those settings around, you can see they're not as kind of tight. And again, if we kind of increase the spacing here, we get back to something like that. If we go back into scattering, actually that was everything in scattering, huh? We go back to texture. Not going to be easy to show some of these. You can mess with the brightness and the contrast, but we really don't. Let me try it. I don't think it's going to show up too well. Yeah. Brightness, contrast. Yeah, it's not showing up in there. Yeah, we'll skip texture for now. So anyway, dual brush, that's when we're going to be working with. Let me change these back. That was my bad. Shouldn't have done that. I find it's easier to just switch to click on the top one than it is to just try and click on the smaller back one, but that's just me. So let's see. Let's go to color dynamics actually. And if you check apply per tip and then foreground and background jitter, you end up with kind of it's going to use or sample a color between these two values. And you can get different things going on with that as well. Hue jitter is going to mess with the hue, so that's going to be your full RGB spectrum. Let me really crank this up, and we can do some kind of weird stuff with this. So we'll get in here, let's get that spacing down, and you can see it's using that whole hue spectrum every time it applies one of these. There's a saturation jitter, so it's going to apply it. Again, it's using a value between the foreground and the background, but it's randomly choosing along this axis right here. Brightness, again, it's going to kind of just choose along that axis, so it's working with the color I've got, but choosing a random value between these, the blue and the green, and then on this list from there. So it's kind of, you can do some fun stuff with this. I once made a like a holiday card. Let me see if do they not have. Oh yeah, yeah. I once did a holiday advertisement. I used like a kind of Thanksgiving-y theme, and I got two kind of seasonal colors like that, or autumn colors, and kind of splash this in the corner of a business card just to fill up some space that kind of needed something in there. I'm going to go ahead and hit Control Z though. We'll hop into the history and I can get rid of some of that. Okay, so that's the brush tool. Pretty handy. It's going to be the majority of the work you're doing in Photoshop is going to be using the brush tool or selection tools to determine what you're editing. So right now I've got all of this right here. One thing I want to make sure of, I hit V, so I changed to the what is technically the move tool, but it's also a selection tool. Make sure you have auto select and layer right here, and that show transform controls is on, and that'll actually let me come in here and I can click on this layer and it'll select whatever I've got here. You can see right here, if I click on this, it's going to select this entire background. You'll want to make sure that these show transform controls are on because it'll help you identify that you clicked on the correct layer. And it's just sort of helpful for getting around in here. So I'll go ahead and click on this. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this marquee tool. And I'm just going to drag across the whole screen and hit the delete key on my keyboard. And that'll just get rid of all that stuff that I had going on there. The next thing I'm going to do is I'll just select this base layer that I have. And I can also, because I still have this selected, you can see the little dashes going around. So it's still the same selection, but it's now on this other layer, and I can hit delete and get rid of it. So let's go ahead and jump into, um, yeah, let me grab an image and we'll come back and we'll start working on some images. All right, so I got a picture of this little puppy right here. And there's a couple different things I want to go over with selections. So I'll go ahead and hit D to reset my colors here. And then what I'm going to do is I'll go over a couple different tools that we have at our disposal here for doing selections. So the selection, this is kind of a freeform selection tool. I don't use that too much. This is the magic wand tool. And to get to this, you kind of have to hold this down. If you hit W multiple times, or Shift W, it'll cycle through those. What I'm going to do, for example, if we wanted to change the dots on here, we're editing with, we did our renders, client loved it, and now they want, but they want a color slightly differently. So because this is pretty much the only red, what I can do is I can use this magic wand tool right here. And what we'll do is we'll set the tolerance. We'll set this kind of high. This will determine how much or how broad. Oops. What? I thought I did 150. Okay. We'll do anti-alias, contiguous, and we can leave that sample layers unchecked. So what will happen is if I click inside of one of these dots, on that 150 is way too high. Let's do, I should have done 50. So you can see as I click on this, it's going to only select inside of these red dots. So I'm holding down Shift while I do this. This will make it a lot easier for us to change this color instead of having to go, first of all, one section at a time. And then now that I've got that selected, we have the quick mask option, which, oops. Hold on, where'd it go? I guess they finally moved it out of here after 20 something years. So if you go to select and edit in quick mask mode, oops, I lost my selection too. Okay, so we have those selected, select, edit in quick mask mode. Really? Oh, you know what? That's my bad. Because it's selecting in, okay, yeah, okay. I see what's going on here. The quick mask is in red and so are the colors on the puppy. Okay, so let's go ahead and change these colors first instead. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit Q and I'm going to go back into the, oops, no, don't do that. I'm going to go into the brush and I just need to refine without being in that. Let me go in here, get back to our normal brush. We'll get rid of all the fun stuff that I was doing. We will take the hardness down to nothing. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw on here. And I wonder if, yeah, we'll live with this. So right now I'm just, what I'm doing, and you can't really see it, is I'm changing the area where it's masking. So you can see that if I erase that, I don't know, maybe you can't. Let me switch to the eraser here. And you can see that it, see as I draw, oh, still got that on the brush though. Let me go back to here. No spacing, light hardness, no shape. Okay. So as I draw, as I erase, that's going to change my selection area right here. So if I hit Q again, you can see that my selection has changed. So these are still selected, but this area is not. So as I draw, it's going to mask off areas that I have selected. And the way that you can tell is by the color. Unfortunately, I chose a red color here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab the erase tool here. And I'm going to kind of just circle through here. We'll do a rough pass like that. We'll get kind of the area that we want. figured out, and then I'm going to do a second pass here. You guys should make sure you choose an image that doesn't have red, I suppose. And if I Q, okay, so I'm going to take that hardness. We'll go about there now, and then again, I'll just kind of loop back through here. Oh, I switched back to eraser. What am I on? Okay, so I've done that. I now have that one selected. I want to get a little bit more inside of there, but we won't worry about that for now. So if I want to change the color of this, I can go to layer, or sorry, we'll go to image, adjustments, color balance, and we can change that selected area that we have. So if I do this, we can kind of tweak this to be slightly different color. If we wanted to entirely change that color, we could go to hue saturation, and we could modify this to change the colors, and see how it's kind of got that little bit of red border that was going on there. That's just because of the tolerance that I chose here. So if I'd gone a little bit looser on the tolerance, I probably could have gotten that selection better. Let me grab a different image. Okay, so clearly you can tell I searched for puppies. So again, let me go back to this and I'll just kind of work over this again. So if I set the tolerance, we'll go to, let's go to 80 for the tolerance. It's kind of subjective on how it works. So let's say we want to get these blue areas, these dark blue ones. And I can go through here. And it's going to be, see, that was a bit of a broad selection. So for this, I'd actually want to drop this down to 60 and then continue to increase the sample size here. And then I could kind of work with that. So again, if I hit Q, now you can see kind of those difference in colors. So if I wanted to come in here, I could, and again, kind of a big fan of doing a broad stroke and then coming back and cleaning it up. In this case, it's going to be easier for me to, especially with some of these tighter corners, just kind of overdraw this and then come back again and underdraw it, or correct the draw boundary. So let me just look through here real quick, and then I'll bump up the size of my tool that I'm using too. And there we go. So now I'll come back with the other brush tool because I was using the eraser there, and I can kind of click through here. Takes a bit of a steady hand, and that's where I mentioned if you do the shift click. So if I click here, one thing I found that was really helpful is if you just hold down shift, like you can't see it, but I'm doing it. And if I just kind of click along this edge, it'll keep working in kind of little segments for me as I click. So that's kind of a quick way to go around it too. And start a new click there and then resume holding down shift. Oh, that was part of that one. Oops. It's okay, we got history. Okay. And then once I'm done with some of those finer details, I can come back with the brush tool again, switch back to it, and get rid of different areas that I know I don't need. I won't bore you guys with me doing the rest of this rope. But now I can hit Q, and we'll just pretend that I did all of this. We'll go to hue saturation, and we'll change the color of that to a green, for example. And that gets us a little bit closer to there. Probably could have masked some of this off a little bit better, but pretty happy with it. Well, not super happy with it, but it's quick demo. Just wanted to show you guys that tool. Some of the other things that we have here are going to be the gradient tool. Wouldn't recommend doing a whole bunch of gradients in Photoshop. Let me throw a new layer here. Gradient is going to use your foreground to background color. So if I had, again, different colors going on here, we'll go back to this green and blue. Where's the mouse? There it is. So I can draw in colors like that. I can change the settings of how it draws it. You can do different things with these, but pretty much anything that you're going to be working with on Photoshop should be fairly small, or you're working in an individual image. And we'll kind of go into that once we get into Illustrator a little bit more, as different programs kind of excel at doing different things. Like the largest size I think I would work on in Photoshop is probably a 5x7 postcard. Anything else is going to be in Illustrator. Um, and then I guess kind of the final tool that I want to go over is going to be the text tool. So I'll hit D and switch back to the default settings. We can start typing in here, and it'll have, you know, the gibberish that I'm putting down. Obviously, you guys should know all this, how to change colors of the text, how to change the fonts, how to change the font size. So you guys should all be comfortable with that at this point. So I think that kind of covers everything I wanted to go over in Photoshop. We'll go ahead and finish this out, and I will grab an image and we will start, or a new image, and we will start on the milestone.